All right, so Jono Frew here. We're on episode 2 of Conversations, or Big Conversations in the back of a little campervan. And I'm chatting today with Mr. James Halford from Methven, and Chesney, his cat, who's taken a fancy to him at this appropriate time. James, can you go ahead and introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm James Halford, originally from the UK. Moved over here in January 1997 with my then partner Claire, who is now my wife. I was a cropping farmer in England, farming just outside the town of Bedford, farming just under 1,000 acres in 2 blocks of land. And the reason I moved over, because one of the blocks of land, the bigger block, was allocated for housing, so I was losing that and I couldn't afford to buy the land in the UK. So I came out here after having done about 4 reconnaissances and decided that Methven was the place I wanted to be, and so we moved out here having not bought any land. Rented a house, bought all the machinery over for 1,000 acres, and fortunately a chap called Morris Woods saw my advert in the local paper and approached me to buy his farm, which I did, and I've been very lucky to end up where I am on a Mayfield silt loam, which is beautiful soil.
Yes,
So
James, I've seen your soil, and I've been lucky enough. I remember, I'll never forget our first visit to your place where we dug our very first hole, and James and I, you'll remember this well, James, we birthed a worm together.
We birthed a worm together, Jono. And every time I go into the field, I hear this little voice saying, "Daddy, Daddy, you've come back."
Where's my other daddy?
Yes, where's my other daddy? And would you like to meet my children?
Oh,
there's millions of them now.
Oh man, how cool is that? So James, so how long have you been on the farm? And I want to know, because you and I have been working together for 6 months or so now, and before that you went through a bit of a transition, or you sort of had a moment where you wanted to discover some new ways of farming. Can you tell me what had you want to discover more, and was it a specific moment where you thought that you wanted to do something a bit different?
Well, there was a series of events that actually ran very close to one another. Probably the first one was at the Winter Fire Conference last, I forget which month it was. Was it July or June, I think? And we took a field trip out to Simon Osborne's, and he dug a hole, and I thought, blow me, my soil supposedly cost a lot more than his, and his looked in much better heart than mine. And I asked him a few questions, and that sort of sowed the seeds. And then I met a chap called Chris Dennis, who's the father of Samuel Dennis, who was installing a couple of lysimeters on the farm. And he suggested I read a book called Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. And he's taught briefly about holistic grazing and Alan Savory. And it just so happens that I'd been given that book by Don Hart, who runs Healthy Soils and is my fertilizer advisor. And I just put it on the bookshelf. So Claire and I were just off on holiday, so I took it with me and read it while I was on holiday. And whilst I was there, I got an email from Abby Horrocks telling me about the Quorum Exchange conference. So I booked onto that. And then I listened to, I forget what the order of the speeches was. When did you gave a presentation that day, didn't you, Jono?
Yep, I opened up the event. I was the first speaker.
Yeah, opened it up, and Sam Lang did a brief presentation. Simon Osborne, Nigel Greenwood, Hamish Belsky, and Peter Barrett all gave a presentation. By lunchtime, I'd sold the plow, I'd sold the drill, I got talking to you, I'd become a hippie, basically.
You took your flex jandals with you that day.
I did. Yeah, I was all in. I saw Abby. She was at the meeting, and I said what I was going to do. She said, "I thought you would." I don't know why she thought that, but anyway, I've been sort of toying around the. I'd been involved with IPM, and I was getting a little bit disillusioned with just how much chemical I was pouring on, and also I wasn't getting the results that I thought I should have done. Everyone seemed to be doing better than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no specific moment. It was just an accumulation of very closely spaced events, which culminated in meeting you. And you were such an impressive, magnificent specimen. I just couldn't help.
I remember you came up to me it wasn't even, the lunch break hadn't even started, and before I left the front of the room, there was this man, and he was just so lit up, and that man ended up being yourself. And I
was buzzing. Yeah, we hadn't even got any food by then.
It was like, it got to this point where I was like, man, I could sit here and talk all day, but we better go and eat something.
Well, I did, and I actually spent the lunch talking to Simon, and he was just humble, and there's something about people, they're humble about what they've achieved. It makes you listen more, doesn't it?
Yep, they're not being righteous.
They're not thrusting it down your throat. And there was such sort of quiet knowledge there, and a certain level of contentment that was very infectious.
Yeah, and you very quickly came on board the group Incents. I invited you to that group, and how have you found being part of the Incents core group, James, since you've come along?
Oh, it's terrific. You can be a bit of a voyeur sometimes, just looking at other people's stuff, or you can choose to contribute. If you ask a question, you get a multitude of replies, which is great. I often ring some of the people up directly because it's a bit easier getting a direct. Because as you know, Jono, I don't actually have a smartphone, so I have to do everything at home.
Me, phone ringing. Let's turn that off. No, well, actually, James, you do have a smartphone. You just choose not to use it. It doesn't have a SIM card.
Oh, okay, all right.
You can't say you don't have one. I've seen it.
All right, I know. I thought it sounded better if I said, because it sounded like I was more old school.
More hippie.
Been found out.
Yeah. As he speaks to us from his tablet.
Yes, exactly. Yes, from my iPad.
So, James, that moment brought on a series of events. You became part of a group. You started learning quite a lot, I would assert. And, I think, did you even revise the book Dirt to Soil? And I know you've added a few more to your collection as well. But what's the journey of learning been like for you?
Nerve-wracking, exciting, times of self-doubt, if I was being honest, but because the change was so sudden and I was so conventional, and really to remedy a problem, you just had to go to a book or ring someone up.
Yeah.
You almost didn't have to think for yourself. Yeah. So, and I've been making mistakes along the way, but to be honest, I made mistakes even with the conventional system. I mean, every year I used to make mistakes, usually on the roadside, so everybody could see.
And so, James, you love your toys, and when we first met, you had a lovely big cultivation drill, and you had a big plow. How big was the plow that you had? Was it 5-furrow?
It wasn't it was only a 5-furrow, but it was a Kverneland iPlow, which linked in with the GPS. So automatically straightened the lines. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. You enjoyed it, right?
I could make all the adjustments from the tractor. I used it on about 100 hectares before I sold it.
And then you had a brand new one on the boat, is that right? And tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, because the original plow didn't have a press arm, because I used to plow with a furrow press and then drill straight onto that. And I was going to do the same with this one. And I was told, yes, the press arm will fit on the new plow. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And eventually I was told, no, it didn't. So I had the choice of replacing it with a new plow, paying the difference, which was actually a lot more than they originally stated, and part exchanging the new old plow, or the old new plow, for the new plow. And it was on its way. It had left where is it coming from? Was it Germany? Or anyway, it was a Kverneland, and it was on the boat, but they allowed me to cancel it, and I traded that in and traded the drill in for a new direct drill, which was a Gaspardo, which is owned by Mashio. And I got Murray Thompson to go and have a look at it for me down in the power farming yard, because I knew nothing about it. And he told me he would be frightened of using it. So that was good enough for me, barely knowing Murray. Of course, there's a theme here that maybe I don't really think, I do jump all in, don't I? But I sort of going on, I sort of trust people, so hopefully the right ones. And so I've ended up with the Gaspardo, which I've been using quite a lot, actually.
Yep, and letting your neighbours borrow it. And
oh yeah, no, Tim's absolutely thrilled with it. He's even talking about getting one himself. He just thinks it's the bee's knees. He's got winter feed in earlier than he's ever done before. It's up around his blooming waist now. Mm-hmm. And he direct drilled some moats the other day into later harvested barley, and that's looking fantastic. I had a surplus of the multi-species cover crop seed, so I oversowed that into his oats. So it'll be very interesting to see what that looks like. Well, it's not just a cover crop; it's for winter feed as well. So it'll be very interesting. There's 3 hectares in there, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
That's, I mean, what I'm hearing there is you've shifted from sort of, would it be fair to say, a bit of a puppet, you know, someone else is pulling the strings, to all of a sudden you're getting creative, you're playing with your neighbour's place. And look, you've even gone out and created a regenerative agriculture focus group locally, haven't you?
Well, it's probably a little bit, I mean, I didn't create it. It was there, and I sort of got the other guys to join, sort of dragged them into the group. So we've got 10 in our group actually, but 2 as sort of guests. And we've been doing a couple of things. It'd be nice to be doing more, but obviously that's going to be a bit of a problem under the present lockdown.
No, I've been to some of your days as a subject matter expert, and I really enjoyed the energy within your group, that sort of supportive, engaging, everyone's really interested in different ideas, and it was really cool, man. And I've seen you sort of thrive in those situations. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, Chesney.
Hello, Chesney.
It's not all about you. No, well, it's good. I mean, obviously I am the member that's sort of gone into it much more than the others. The reason why I've gone in, so thank you, Ches, so hard is partly, whereas really financially I'm reasonably secure. At 62, I don't want to spend years experimenting and get to 70 and think, oh yeah, I think I'll give it a go, and then a year later decide to sell the farm. So that is the main reason. I think if I was the age of, say, Tom Rudge or whatever, I might try 1 or 2 fields before leaping in wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And outside of you talk about your farm as an arable farm, but I know this year it's been an introduction of some stock onto the farm after 20 years of no stock. What's that been like for you, James?
Been terrific, actually. I've been thinking back on it. So we had 68 head of what do you call them? Steers. You can see I'm not I'm not a stock
They
farmer.
are steers.
But they're cows of a sort, anyway. Male steers, have they got their bits?
Steers have had their reproductive bits removed. They've just got the twig and no berries.
Oh, right. Okay. So, and Gareth Daly, whose steers they were, is an organic farmer well, he's also a baling contractor, but he's an organic farmer over at Hororata. And he's part of our group as well. So he's well into this sort of grazing. And it was terrific. They did really well. I think we got off 21 hectares. And bearing in mind, we didn't have the best establishment of the cover crop. But the 21 hectares, I think we got 8 weeks of grazing out of for 61. And that was moving them on every day. Mm-hmm. So trampling, eating a third, leaving a third. It's a little bit arbitrary, that figure. I mean, it might have been because I think they were going for the nice stuff and trampling a lot of the poorer stuff. But regeneration of because it had all gone, a lot of it had gone to seed, and it's terrific just seeing what's germinating now. We've had good rain, and it's really vibrant, so it's terrific. And I'm going around everything that I've drilled so far. So we had short-term cover crop after the wheat that we've since drilled into grass, and I selectively took out the grass. I hope I have anyway. It's looking a bit sick, and it's left the vetches and the other legumes behind. And I'm thinking, I think I could put stock across this, even if the grass is really small. I don't think we'll be able to mob graze it, but I think you can let them wander around. So I'm looking at almost every field as a potential food source for stock. Yeah,
and rightly so. It's and for those that aren't up with James's progress and where he's at, he has been playing with cover cropping for the first time on his farm. Would it be fair to say, James, prior to that, everything was a monoculture?
It would be very fair to say that, apart from the weeds, obviously.
Yeah.
Which we still kept on coming back.
Which you would have kept fighting to the death.
Oh, God, did I ever. Just doesn't
James,
make sense. You can't work out. You've been spraying oodles of chemical on these things. You've been ploughing to bury weeds. You've been cultivating to kill them. You've been pouring chemicals on to kill them. And yet you still seem to have more than when you started. I mean, where's the bloody logic in that?
Well, at least you can see that, Mr. Halford.
Well, I could always see it, but of course, isn't the definition of a fool who is someone who keeps on doing the same thing expecting a different outcome?
Correct. And look, every year, industry brings in the newest product and the newest technology to overcome, the failures of the past. It's a bit like, my presentation at Lincoln around the dead horse theory. I'm glad to hear you've dismounted the dead horse, James. So James has taken some opportunities to go ahead and plant some diversities on his place. And the first cover crop we did was a 26 species cover crop, a mixture of perennials and annuals. And we planted it into some areas that had been fallowed for a long time, I think around 7 months. Was that right, James?
Yeah, it was. Oh, God, I cringe. So these were ex-grass fields. I'd sprayed them out early autumn and just left them over the winter. How dumb is that? And the intention was I would have ploughed it and drilled it into peas or some other spring sown break crop. But we sprayed it off and we drilled straight into it. Wasn't 100% successful, but we, as I say, we got 8 weeks feed out of it for 68 steers. So not disastrous.
And it was able to regenerate and have, some successions take place. And there's actually some videos within my YouTube channel of the very paddocks we're discussing. And after grazing, James and I had a really fun day out there investigating different poos and what we could find that had gone through the cows and germinated. It was quite something, wasn't it, James? Well,
God, cow shit's so fascinating.
to have
It's,
poo at all on your farm.
Nature's just fascinating. When you start going, really zooming in, there's a world within a world within a world. The closer you get, it's all integrated. It's just incredible once you start looking into it. And I've only just scratched the surface.
But isn't it funny, like before, all that stuff was going on, but if you're anything like me, you just get so caught up in the rat race and in the in the comfortable rut that you and the pressures, most of which is self-inflicted, but you get so sort of tunnel vision that you don't see all this amazing stuff around you.
You don't. You just don't. No. There's a certain, I know I sound like I've been on drugs, but anyway, there's a certain sort of pleasure and what's the word? You feel like a calmness when you walk into the field and you see all this diversity.
Oh yeah, no, that's not drug-like at all. that's something I get to experience most days. It's like all of a sudden you're walking into a field, you're not the person controlling everything. You're sort of part of that ecosystem as opposed to being, Mr. Dictator at the top. You're sort of.
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to beat nature into submission, bend it to your world.
Yeah, how long did you spend doing that?
Oh, well, I've been farming since I took over the farm back in England. In 1984, I started managing, pouring chemicals on. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, if you're anything like me, you're sort of going through the motions and doing your thing like you're told to. But for me, there was something underlying through that, all those years of that sort of farming, that moron mentality and that trying to control. Although I knew it as the way, and it was the only way I knew how to operate, but something within me, when I think back, it was always screaming at me like, what are you doing? Like every day was just about killing.
Yes. Well, as I said, I was involved with the IPM research with FAR, and we were running some aphicide trials the last 2 years on my place because I was getting really quite upset with the amount of synthetic pyrethroids or insecticides my neighbours were pouring on their crops to control aphids. 5 times. Just ludicrous. And of course, the potential for building up resistance is greatly increased. And aphids aren't going to stop at their fence. They're going to hop over into mine. So from that point of view, I was upset, but also from an environmental point of view, just absurd, really.
And tell me, James, now, you've had this view of, we used to have problems like aphids, and we'll stick to aphids in this one, but how do you view aphids now? What is your thoughts on aphids now? If let's say somebody's got an aphid concern, what is your thoughts on it?
Well, I won't say they don't scare. It doesn't scare me, but because it does. But there are things I've learned. I mean, they're part of an ecosystem, and of course, they're a food source for other things. So I'm trying to create the environment that the beneficials can thrive and eat the aphids, also create a healthier soil that creates a healthier plant, that creates a plant that's able to withstand aphid attacks. So I'm still frightened of them. I'm not going to drill my wheat so early, so that the crop won't be so susceptible to aphid attacks because it won't be in so early, and also the disease won't come in quite so early. So rightly or wrongly, no one's told me any different, but I think that's what I'm gonna be doing. And then I shall speak to people who've been at it a bit longer than me, like Nigel Greenwood, and get hold of some peppermint oil or whatever, and stink the place out.
Yeah, but look, you hit the nail on the head there for me, James. That the point that, and you made it beautifully, was that no longer is it's like, here's a problem, I need to kill it. You're taking a step back and you're viewing your system as a whole and looking at, you know, why is this thing here? What is this telling me? And what do I need to do within my management to make sure that I'm not a victim to this pest? Or, you know, you've not even labeled it a pest anymore. It's telling you something, isn't it?
Exactly. And I mean, you don't just, I think one of the things that I'm learning is that you don't just open a bottle of something and you think about it. You think about, is there a problem? If there is, then there are alternatives to what you used to do. Or can you accept a level of damage, or can you accept a level of weeds or level of disease? You don't need zero pests. You don't need zero weeds. You don't need zero disease.
Yeah.
You know, you're not after perfection.
Yeah, for sure. And even going a step further is, you know, and I've heard you do it yourself, and you are operating from the spaces like what within my market has me need to, you know, provide these things the way that, you know, for instance, when people are producing seed for certain people or companies, there's requirements around, you know, purity and cleanliness of the crop. Whereas, you know, you're sort of out there playing with crops that you can afford to play around with, and perhaps there's a bit more threshold of what's acceptable.
Oh, definitely. And I am thinking, do I want to carry on down this route of growing high purity seeds? You know, is the cost too great for the benefit that you get to your soil? I'm doing it this year, but do I want to carry, you know, if I can't manage it this year, companies that I've had a long association with, I might have to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't deliver what you require, and I understand why you require it, but I just can't deliver. I'm going to have to look at doing something else. And I'm looking at maybe growing milling barley, which, you know, bread for milling wheat, which I've never grown since I've been here, because I'm feeling guilty that I actually don't really produce food. I produce food for cows. I produce grass seed for the golf industry, for Donald Trump. God. Yes.
Commodity markets, man.
Commodity markets, you know, so I need to think about the end market. It'll be good to be associated closer to the customer, that's for sure.
Yeah. And you've been growing, well, you've had people growing potatoes on your place for some time, and tell me your thoughts on that on your place and where it sits in your farm's future.
Well, every time I walk past the field, I apologize to the soil what I put it through. Because so and we're finishing this year, poor Malcolm. I'm sorry, Malcolm. But so we plowed the field early. When they came to start getting the ground ready for the potatoes, it had slumped so badly. And supposedly I have lovely soil. Maybe it's a beautiful soil. It has slumped so badly. They had to subsoil the bloody stuff before they could actually start working. It had gone so tight.
Yeah.
And but it's so destructive. It is such a destructive business. I think they must have cultivated about three times, but not just a little tickle. You know, they just heaved it up and throwed it into the air and done everything. And then of course he's a seed grower, so he's got to keep the aphids out, so puts on insecticide every few weeks. So that's it's terrible.
Oh, this is the beginning of the end.
And so
No,
hi Claire.
Yeah, Jono's recording me.
And so James, I'm thinking that for people watching that are, you know, resonating with what you say and possibly having thoughts themselves around current systems, what would you say to people who are on the fence about what they're doing and looking for new alternatives or new systems, and are perhaps, you know, hearing the word regenerative thrown around? What would you say to those people?
God, you know, this is something I think about all the time, because it's one thing doing it itself, but when someone asks you, and potentially they might follow what you say, you become a lot more cautious. Really, it's one thing to risk your own financial situation, but it's another thing advising people. I would think, do like a lot of the others, like Hamish Belsky's done, that do a lot of YouTubing and talk to people and read some books. Don't overthink it, but just talk to other farmers that have done it and get their insight in it, and you get a much better insight into the pitfalls and the successes than you would just by reading a book. But it is immeasurably stimulating process once you start going down it. You know, a whole new world opens up to you, and you start looking at things in such a different way. So yes, it would be great if you just said, to hell with it, I'm going to do it. You know, good on you if you do that. I would countenance a bit of caution, really, if you're younger and you've got time on your side. But if you really are absolutely distraught at what you think you're doing to the planet, and you've got an opportunity to actually do something beneficial, then go for it. But get as educated as you can and talk to as many people as you can.
Fantastic, James. That's gorgeous. And what would you say for like you say, get some good people around you, talk to some farmers? I've seen you engaging with farmers and to and fro. And what do you think the shift is from the way in which you used to operate and now the relationships you have with farmers with this new view on operating and life?
Well, the exchange of ideas is just fascinating. I would say one thing about going back to what your previous question was, that, and this is stated by John Kempf in one of his podcasts, and that, by the way, everybody, that is a great podcast. And I forget who the guy he was speaking to, but they concluded that getting a mentor on your side is really useful. I mean, I've got you, Jono, but because you do have moments that you question what you're doing, and it's very important to have someone on your side who gives you an emotional sort of leg up and supports you and tells you, no, you're not being stupid. Not everything's going to go smoothly, but it'll all be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes we get a bit caught up and things get a bit significant, and just having that someone around to take you back a few notches and really look at the things like, possibly they're not as disastrous.
No, it's vital. And I've actually told you, Jono, that you need a mentor for you, because you just do. It's just great to have someone on your side that doesn't have an agenda.
Yeah.
So I think that is very, very important thing to do.
Well, whether you realise it or not, James, you've been a big factor in my life and almost like a mentor yourself. So I want to thank you for, our engagements are always two-way, man. And sometimes I think, shit, I should be paying you.
Well, I mean, so much in life is integrated. Every aspect of life has an integrated other factor. You can't live in isolation. And we've been talking about a lot of things just recently, haven't we? And you look at nature and the wildlife. It's not a mono species of animal out there, because it won't survive. You look at crops, you look at the plants. It's not monocropping. You need multi-species cropping. You get into the soil. It's not a single microorganism. It's a whole multitude of but everything has a multitude of other things that help it survive.
Mm. Mm. So now
So
you're
that's
part
what
of
we
that
need.
ecosystem.
We need different people around us. We don't need just one person.
We want our surroundings as diverse as our microbes under our feet.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's a lot more pleasurable to walk around in a multi-species world, isn't it?
Oh, it is, man. You and I spent wonderful times out there, and I always crack up because you you tell me off for digging up too many of your precious plants.
I know. I'm a little bit protective towards every mic. It's probably when I start getting protective of the microbes that you need to start thinking I should need some counselling.
He's coming for redemption over the last 3 decades of of treatment.
I know. I cringe. I cringe with embarrassment. Some of the things I used to think and say.
Yeah, no, look, there's nothing wrong, man, and there's a real validity to having come from that to where you are now. Because I look at you now, and anyone looking would think that man wouldn't hurt a fly, and I tend to agree. And when I get out there digging too often, you want to hear James's language. It gets very colourful.
Yes. Although you did dig, we found little ooey gooey worm, didn't we?
Wormy, we did find Wormy, our first hole together.
Yes, yes. You want to be careful how you say that. Our first hole together. Yeah.
We're close. We're not that close.
No, exactly.
COVID-19.
Well, certainly not at the moment.
Well, James, before I leave you, I just want to ask, is there anything you'd like to say to the wider community out there? Anything at all? Anything that's on your mind? I know there's people are doing a lot of contemplating at the moment. I just want to give you an opportunity. If there's anything there that you'd like to offer anyone, you're an influential man. I'd love to hear your thoughts before we end the call.
Well, and probably the one thing that started me thinking down this route was a feeling of guilt that, I was part of the consumer society and I was extracting carbon from the environment for my own benefit. And I now realize I could actually do something. I could do something for the environment, something productive. And that was, start improving the soil. And, we're all small cogs in a big wheel, but it's allowed me to actually feel like I'm actually really doing something positive rather than just recycling plastics and trying to use less petrol, use a smaller car. I can actually really do something positive, not just for the soil, but for the greater environment. So
and for other people, James. I've seen people looking at you and, learning from you. Could you have ever imagined the impact you might have had just taking on the stuff?
Well, I don't really see myself as having made a great impact.
I know you don't. But you have, James. I've seen it.
Well, there's an English saying, I know it refers to money, but I suppose if you take care of the pennies, the pounds will take care of themselves. So if you do things on a small scale, you'll have hopefully a greater effect than just in your own little neck of the woods.
I like it, Mr. Halford. Well, James, thank you so much for your time this evening. I really enjoyed our chat. And I look forward to this whole thing blowing over and you and I can be reunited.
Okay, and I'm sorry it looks like I'm in a hospital bed, but this is just the most comfortable position for me to have this chat without being interrupted by the dogs and the cat. Well, although Chesley did like to contribute. That shower of rain that you saw coming across the screen, that was Chesley flicking his head and letting fly with all his saliva. So thank God he hasn't got COVID.
For your contribution.
A pleasure, Jono.
All right, James. Toodaloo.